Greetings. Now let us learn about Hemospray. So here is a bleeding tumor, and the patient came in with bleeding and drop in hemoglobin of at least 3 to 4 grams, and we decided to use Hemospray to control this tumor bleeding. And you're seeing the application of Hemospray onto this ulcerated mass that bled recently. So with this introduction, let me take you through the indications for Hemospray. Hemospray has been studied in the treatment of various types of bleeding, peptic ulcer bleeding, in the colon, post-polypectomy bleeding. In addition to that, endoscopists from around the world have used in a variety of bleeding lesions where either a clip or thermal modality has not worked, or they were worried that because of the patient's underlying bleeding diatheses due to either low platelets or due to abnormal coagulation, and they worried that the patient may rebleed quickly, and applied Hemospray as an additional measure to either a clip or cautery. So let us learn about the principles of Hemospray application. The most important thing from the endoscopist point of view, this is a non-touch technique, and there is no thermal injury involved, and you keep the catheter 1 to 2 centimeters away from the lesion, and with the activation of the Hemospray, this powder comes on and creates a sealant and stops the bleeding. One could apply the Hemospray multiple times until the endoscopist is satisfied with the hemostasis. So the key is to stay about 1 to 2 centimeters and then repeated applications till a sealant is applied and the sealant stops the bleeding. So now let us learn about how do you set up for Hemospray. You need a large syringe, preferably 20 or 30 cc syringe, that is air-filled syringe. And this syringe is used to keep the catheter dry as the catheter is being introduced into the endoscope channel. And to deliver the powder, we need this through the scope catheter. This is available either as a 7 French catheter or a 10 French catheter. The catheter has to be completely dry for the powder to go through that catheter without forming a coagulum inside the catheter if there were to be water. So a dry catheter is critical. And then this is the Hemospray device. The device acts by delivering the Hemospray powder. It is an inert powder that is delivered by the power of a carbon dioxide cylinder that is in that handle. So here is a Hemospray catheter. You could either pick a 7 French catheter or a 10 French catheter. If the scope channel allows, it is better to start with a 10 French catheter, and then you need a large capacity syringe. The first thing is to dry up the field if possible, and The second one is the endoscopist should clear that area where he's going to apply the Hemospray, so there's no blood there or there's no clot there. And we all, as endoscopists, tend to get into the habit of suctioning whenever we see fluid. So one of the measures that could be taken is to completely shut off the suction mechanism of the scope so that the endoscopist doesn't accidentally suction. And then before the catheter is introduced into the scope, it is a good idea to take a 30 cc syringe or a 20 to 30 cc air-filled syringe and flush the biopsy port till there is no fluid coming out of the biopsy channel, and then introduce the catheter via the biopsy channel with the large syringe attached to the catheter and continuously flushing the catheter so as to keep the catheter dry as it is going down the channel. As it's going down the channel, it is important that the endoscopist does not apply any suction if in case the suction is still on. This is really critical, otherwise the powder will get clogged up in the channel or in the catheter. So key is to keep on flushing. As you can see, we're flushing air and the lumen is getting a little bit bigger. And then once the catheter is in the field, you hook the catheter to the Hemospray device and screw it to that end. So now you have the device ready, and the next step is the device is ready with the device attached to the catheter. The catheter is dry, and you want to start spraying. As part of the spraying, the next step is to activate the CO2 cylinder by turning the knob in the direction shown. All right. After activating the CO2 cylinder, you open the valve so that the gas can go into the catheter, and then press the trigger button to deliver CO2 along with the powder. Typically, the device comes in with at least 2 or 3 cartridges, and each time you press on the trigger button, about 2 grams of powder is delivered. It is important when we deliver when we press on the trigger button, when you press the first time, some of the powder may be still in the catheter, so it's a good idea to press first for a couple of seconds and then press again quickly so as to deliver a large amount of powder spray quickly onto the bleeding lesion. Here is the case. As you can see here, we kept the catheter at least 1 to 2 centimeters away from the area. The first puff was a small amount, and important to keep triggering the device to deliver more puffs, and then aim at the areas of interest and apply a large amount of the Hemospray onto the surface until the bleeding stops. Typically, one could use at least 1 or 2 of these cartridges to a maximum of 3. And it's important to keep in mind to avoid suction during the procedure to prevent fluid from getting into the catheter and plugging the catheter. If the catheter gets plugged, you may not be able to deliver any more of the Hemospray In that case, one needs to remove the catheter out of the endoscope and then flush the channel with air to dry it, and then reinsert a new catheter, going through the same steps of flushing the catheter repeatedly with air as it's going down the channel, and avoid the urge to apply suction. Hemospray provides a mechanical barrier on top of the bleeding site. It does not affect the coagulation, but just a mechanical barrier effect stops the bleeding. But the effect of Hemospray tends to be temporary with a risk of rebleeding. Hemospray has been useful in conditions where the primary modality has not worked, or like application of a clip or application of cautery, or when the access to that area is very difficult, or in patients with underlying bleeding tendencies where you may want to avoid using cautery. One of the adverse events is the risk of rebleeding, and hence in high-risk conditions the endoscopist may have to plan for that and manage them appropriately. Hemospray contraindications include fistula and perforations. Initial stages, people worried about Hemospray in the management of varicose bleeding, but I've seen some case reports of varicose ulcer bleeding that was managed with Hemospray, where they could not apply a band or use cautery. I hope this is useful. Thank you.